It's time to head south with the Fantha from Down Under.
The Fantha.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
From Down Under.
Do. Or do not. There is no try.
G'day, mate. How you going?
Here is your host, Adam O'Brien.
G'day, folks. How you going? This is Adam O'Brien coming to you live from Quinlan's Cantina in the Gold Coast of Australia. And, of course, this is the Fantha from Down Under, brought to you by the one and only Fantha Tracks Radio. Star Wars news in a single file. And I can tell you, we're going to be chatting a little bit of Star Wars tonight here on the show. Joining us tonight is a dear friend of mine and a dear friend, of course, of Fantha Tracks itself, the one, the only, Den, the amazing musician, and of course one of Canada's greatest exports when it comes to bringing positivity, fun, and just the love of Star Wars out there. So Den's going to be on tonight to chat a little bit about his band F105, their current releases, and a little bit of Star Wars, all here on the Fantha from Down Under. G'day folks, how you going? This is the Fantha from Down Under, coming to you live on Fantha Tracks Radio from Gold Coast in Australia. And joining me on the other side of the globe, across the pond, is the one, the only, the singer that you know so well from such amazing tracks as Rebel Girl and, of course, Desert Planet, and my personal favourite right now is No Man's Land. Off the debut album of F105, it is none other than Den, mate. How are you?
Good, mate. Let's cut some tape, mate.
Now, buddy, I've got to say, you've always been a dear friend when it comes to music and obviously your love of Star Wars. And I've seen your progression as not only a musician, but also a lyricist, I personally think. And this album that you've put out over literally 12 months ago now is the strongest in your journey as a, shall we say, a songsmith?
I'll take that.
Nice.
I think, well, I mean, I did 5 albums with my former project, The Souls, and the only of the 5 albums, I think the first 2, I sometimes, if I listen back now, I can sometimes get a little queasy with some of my lyrics, but I see where they're going. Once I hit the third album, which was Broken Ghost, and then the Notus Cathodos, which had the first Star Warsy song on it, The Hero's Journey, really. The RFR song was really more Hero's Journey than Star Wars, but and then from that point on, I've been pretty happy lyrically, and I really get excited about taking it to new areas with each album. I think musically and lyrically, I'd never repeat an album. And the debut F105 record was really an extension of where we got with the last Souls album, which was Sand in the Sun, with the spiritual stuff, with the Hero's Journey stuff. But I think F105 was my attempt to be more Star Wars in spirit. More George Lucas Star Wars in spirit, in that not sounding Star Wars, but just you take the spiritual ideas, maybe even some political stuff, some heavier stuff, and make it fun. So I think lyrically I was able to have a balance of fun and serious that I've never had before.
Yes,
like Rebel Girl and Desert Planet are fun, you know?
Well, they are. It's certainly much more of a deep dive into the things that you're very passionate about. And folks, if you could liken the actual work that Den has done to anything, a lot of people have, say, one mentor in life, and to help them through the hurdles and give them the skills and talent that they will need to get to that next level. Well, Den's very much like Paul Atreides out of the Frank Herbert novel Dune, in the fact that he's had a couple. And of course, a couple of influences, if you like, in that way of being a mentor. And one of those is, of course, the one, the only Bono of U2, and also the amazing Canadian musician Gord Downie. Now, the late musician was one of the greatest when it came to his strength as a songwriter, lyricist, and one of the things that I think Den is not given enough credit for. He has taken that talent also of being a poet from Gord Downie and really mastered when it come down to the last couple of songs you've done. Mate, you've done very well.
Thank you. First of all, my Canadian head's getting a little too big comparing me to Paul Atreides and Gord Downie and Bono, but I'll take it because I think Gord Downie specifically, most people listening to this probably don't know because they're the biggest band in Canada, and they will stay that way, I think, through all of history. I don't think any band will ever mean as much to Canadians as the Tragically Hip, Gord's band. If you're not from Canada, you never understand why. But he was like an abstract painter with his words. So as he grew, he would write down poetic verses or even lines that people said, and he would carry like a journal. And then he would cut and paste, almost like a montage, like an abstract painting, but a collage and montage, non-montage collage. So he would collage lyrics that he had written at different times about different things, and he would paste them together, even if he had a theme for the song, in a way that worked for the theme. And what that did was it evoked something that was really layered in people's mind. Like, good poetry makes you interpret things many different ways, and everyone can interpret poetry their own way. And I think that's why one of the reasons why he, as a lyricist, had that staying power, which was he always went back to a song and heard something new in the words or interpreted them differently. And I think he may be a little... I think he should get more credit in terms of being a lyricist and rock and roll in general. There's bands in the world that think... There's artists that think they're one of the greatest rock bands ever. Like, I remember when Pearl Jam was young and they first came to Canada, they were asked, "Oh, what are you excited to do here while you're in Canada?" And they said to see the Tragically Hip. Like, they were really respected throughout the music scene in the world.
Crack a stone as the moonlight glows. Where is home? Falling clouds, rising smoke. Do you remember this land before it was broke?
Be sure to subscribe on iTunes for Fantha Tracks Radio and all the other great shows along with Fantha from Down Under. Also, you can find us on Spotify, of course on Stitcher Radio, and of course wherever you can find great podcasts. You can catch me, Adam O'Brien, at The Lethal Mullet on Instagram and Twitter.
So the other thing that might be of interest to our Star Wars people is that Gord Downie gave me the key for how to mix Star Wars into rock as poetry, not as like a literal thing where I talk about Anakin like Weird Al or something like that, you know? So one of the things that Gord did in Canada, which really I think he was a fanatic about hockey, you know, like we are about Star Wars. And from their first song that had some hockey in it was a song called 50 Mission Cap, I think. And it told the story of Bill Barilko, this guy who was on the team. He scored the winning goal that won the Leafs the cup in like the 70s. But then shortly after, he was found dead on a fishing trip in northern Ontario, and no one knows. They couldn't figure out from the autopsy how. Like, no one knows how he died. So it was really kind of a Canadian legend. So, and it became a legend that a lot of people didn't know about. But then with this song, Gord told that story and researched it well, and it became one of the biggest hits in Canadian music history, and it sort of made a lot of young people that wouldn't have thought about Canadian history or Canadian myths be all of a sudden really interested in Canadian myths all over the country. So, and the way he did it too was more poetic, so it was a hockey song, but not like a literal hockey song, you know, not about going to play hockey. It was about this Bill Barilko guy, and so then that was sort of my key to thinking, oh wait, I can mix Star Wars myth into my storytelling and have it not be like a literal Star Wars song, but maybe poetic.
Which I think is something that really makes it accessible, especially in Gord's part, and something that I think your music is, very open for people to not only interpretation, but for them to sort of, suppose, apply the hero's journey in those songs to their, story or their plight, if you like.
Yeah, that's music to my ears, no pun intended, because that was, with songs like Desert Planet and Rebel Girl, that's literally my exact intention, is to make something that feels Star Warsy, but doesn't literally mention Star Wars, but is authentic to the hero's journey. So that instead of, I think that music works different than a movie. For instance, a movie tells a story of a character, and then you see yourself in that character. That's mythology. You reflect, like the Edge sang in that U2 song, a man makes a picture, a moving picture, through light projected, he can see himself up close. That's movies. That's mythology. But in music, I found, to me, when people would write like a literal story, like of come up with a character, say like The Who's Tommy, or even anything like that, which became like literal storytelling, I never felt like the person in that song. The way I feel, like, I don't know what happens when you're watching a movie, but you can feel like you're the person in that movie. Does that make sense?
It does. And there's certain movies that would say, sort of break that formula to a certain extent. But music is something that can really trap you. And I think because you place it where you play music sometimes. For example, if you're listening to work like yours, and you could be either, working out, or you could be doing, your daily grind, work or something like that, for example. But the words, spiritually, those words entrench in you, and they sort of give you, I suppose, your own inner journey, if you like, as you're doing things. I think that's something that really traps, the mind and the music into your own life.
First of all, this is my favorite thing to talk about, because when I came up with this like concept to add the hero's journey to my music, that gave me my philosophy as a writer. But So, like, I think it's to do with, like, what Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung talk about the dream state of mythology and how those archetypes work on a subconscious level. And the dream state is images, right?
Yes.
So I think something about a movie puts you into that dream state where the image, you're dreaming, you're seeing a character like a dream, like, you know, say Luke or Anakin or Rey, but you become them sort of in the movie. You feel their emotions. That's the thing. You feel their emotions. Like, and that's you as them feeling it. That's how it happens. That's the key emotion. So it's like Picasso and even George Lucas said, like, art is emotion. Only emotion, Picasso said. Only. But so with a song, I never felt the emotion of a character, like, say, Tommy from the Who's Quadrophenia. So I didn't want to sing about Star Wars characters. I didn't feel like I could make anyone feel anything through those characters. Or I didn't even want to invent my own characters and my own myth. Lots of people have done, like Rush. That was a big thing in, like, sci-fi rock. Just not the Who, but bands like Rush. So I felt like a song should just have the hero's journey embedded in it without mention really of specific characters, so that the listener, while they're, you know, walking around, say with their headphones on, becomes the actual character, and the music is the soundtrack of the hero's journey that they're in that moment.
Yes. And, you know,
does that make sense?
It does, and it's more akin to less about, I suppose, music in that regards. It's storytelling, and it's almost role play in some extenses, because the music is the sort of the if you liken it to, like you're saying, visually, it's kind of giving you the location, it's giving you the setting, it's giving you everything around you, and as you start to layer in the actual words of putting you in place of this hero's journey, the challenges that they're going to face, that's what really brings it down to making it their journey through your music.
Yeah, the listener's journey. Yes. I want them to be the hero, because they are. Like, that's what Joseph Campbell was on about. Everyone has a hero's journey, and even Jung was on it. That's what Carl Jung was saying. He was saying to Freud, no, look, this is not flighty stuff. He's like, if people who have mental challenges or issues in their life, if they get tuned into where they are at on their hero's journey, then something clicks in their DNA, which motivates them to meet the challenge. So the lyrics, that's why the lyrics in my hero's journey stuff is not linear. It's not a story that starts like, oh, here the hero starts and then goes through these steps. All the songs are unlinear, and even the lyrics within the songs are unlinear. So I guess that's an influence from Gord in a way too, which is very, like, collagey. So that wherever you happen to be in your hero's journey, maybe there's a song we do that can fit into where you're at that day. You know, because really in real life, our hero's journey steps are all over the place every day, and it's not as maybe linear as it is in movies.
I think so too, and it goes back to, I suppose, George's influence, and I'm sure you listeners out there today will take this home on board. Here's a quote from The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He says, "We must reclaim the visionary," so that's the big part, is what you've brought to this here, is, you know, it's visually in their dream state. The utopian, the dreamer of the better or happier world. These are the non-childish or lies. These are the transcendence of men, the loss, the hurts, realization of mortality we all face, and then to celebrate the present life moment also. So there you go. It's pretty much nails what you've just said.
I like what he was saying, but the mortality part is something that recently, I think, came in to my writing on the F-105 debut album, which was the last song, Last Moment, which is basically a meditation, almost an atmospheric song into if this is your last moment now, like, make sure you're conscious of what you're doing. You know, would you want to die after right now doing what you're doing or having done what you've just done. So that was a cool, and I actually felt like that was maybe one of my strongest songs, and I was like, okay, if that's the last song I ever record and I do die now, I'll be happy with that.
And I think that's part of what it is. I mean, you also have the idea that people that are interested in hero's journey, or that subconsciously don't realize that they're sort of in that state. I think the music, or in this case of say Star Wars, even if they're watching those movies, they don't realize that the storytelling is that good in those instances that they're already hitting those points as they go along the lines. Obviously, Joseph Campbell made sure with the study of those myths that there were certain checks along the way that the hero would have to face. For example, he says here, "Not all who hesitate are lost. The psyche has many secrets in reserve." So basically saying that, you're going to find these challenges, but you're not going to realize that you have the power within you to do something about it. And he says, and these are not disclosed unless required. So unless forced to face the challenge.
Yeah, whether by a circumstance or you force yourself, or if it's an external like mentor. Yeah, that's what. Great. That's why I love this scene, in particular in Last Jedi of Luke, help directing Rey towards her inner being. That was beautiful. That was actually taken right out of. I feel like that was that image of the blade of grass was taken right out of The Hero with 1,000 Faces, because the quote is, I remember stumbling upon it. Well, I just happened to be reading that book when Last Jedi came out. It wasn't intentional, but there's a line, the mentor or the guide or the teacher, I can't remember what word he used, can even use a blade of grass to direct the wanderer towards the inner sanctum of their heart. And Brian Johnson literally put that blade of grass on screen as Luke was directing Rey into her inner being. It was only recently I've always pondered that metaphor, like why blade of grass? And it's actually represented in that scene that I think it's the whole fabric of the universe, the atoms, the creation, the destruction, that's going on in that scene. Even like a blade of grass grows and then it dies. I think every answer to the reality of the cosmos is in a blade of grass. And that's why it's used as a metaphor in that scene. And that's poetry. I mean, that's what we all know is great about Star Wars. And what people who think they are authorities on poetry and film don't get is that there's really great poetry going on.
Oh, very much so. I mean, like George always repeated choruses, if you like, of music in the way that he would present, a story element or something that could have a mirror in another element, or a balance, a yin to a yang. And in this case, Last Jedi has got so many. And one of the biggest themes is failure. And failure is a great teacher. Obviously, we see that scene literally with Yoda saying, at the end of the day, we are what they are what we cannot grow beyond. That failure point gives them what it is that they need to grow past to become better than their masters or further down the line. And the thing is, Luke's own failure is what teaches him. Kylo's failure is what teaches him for better, or in this case for worse, in becoming who he is. And even at the end of the film, when we get that, obviously the force projection, and that is a biggest teacher for Kylo, and the fact that his own worst enemy is himself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the more I think about it, the more, you probably know that I've said on Facebook a million times that The Last Jedi is actually my favorite movie of all time. And that's not just me reacting, because we're a year later now. and I still feel that. And or are we more? We're more than a year later. We're almost 2 years later. So, yeah, man, that's my favorite scene in any movie ever. The crate encounter that says everything that I believe in terms of what spirituality is, what nonviolence is, what violence is, what teaching is, what compassion is. God, that's the greatest scene ever. I think that 2 years later, the fact that we're talking about this line, the greatest teacher failure is, the greatest teacher failure is. Wow. That is something that's going to last for a half a century as Star Wars wisdom. Equal to anything that George Lucas ever wrote. Like, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. That will last forever, but maybe even failure, the greatest teacher, is even more powerful. Like, I always see people quoting that.
And because it's the truth, like at the end of the day, going even back to episode 1 all the way through, the mistakes that we make is what we learn from, and it's very relatable for us in life. We make a mistake. We pretty much, 9 times out of 10, humans won't make the same mistake again because it's such a bad experience. They'll go, okay, this is how I get around that and not do that next time.
Right. That's a great lesson. So yeah, we're really on the... I got to be careful because I can end up just talking about The Last Jedi the whole conversation.
No, instead, let's go through the actual album for the folks out there today, because I think this is the anniversary, folks, of the actual release of this album and the first tour that was done, and obviously to give you a bit of an insight into what the song's about. Now, track 1 is called Rebel Girl. Obviously, a lot of people in the Star Wars community will know this song from, especially 12 months ago, getting it out there, promoting it. A lot of the podcasts out there in the community have played this song. And it's a great track at the end of the day. Tell us a little bit about making this song. So
this would be I felt a lot was on the line with this song as a lead single for the F-105 debut album, because essentially this was, even though I did a lot of Hero's Journey songs on the last few Souls albums, there was only the one that was Star Wars-y in feeling, right? So then to get to the debut F-105 record and feel like, I want to make another song like this, because not only did it work for me, and not only is it the subject matter that I love more than anything, but I also found that this Hero's Journey Star Wars-y thing that I found worked for people, for my audience. It worked like, Carl yesterday, the drummer from Fantha Tracks, and the co-host of the new show Desert Planet Dis on your wonderful network. He was telling me, and you were telling me this way back, that he got into music in Star Wars because of my RFR song. And that was written to be a song that would inspire people specifically to find their journey and start creating their thing that they need to create. Like that was about trying to see if this hero's journey can work through songs to inspire people to create their own thing. And then that it had worked. So then to get to Rebel Girl, the challenge was, again, I thought, okay, well, the hero's journey is a useful thing to help people where they're at. So my niece, she was 9 when she fell in love with Star Wars because of The Force Awakens. And then by the time of making this album, I think she was about 11 or 12. And she'd never really liked any of our songs, and I realized I was failing as a rock musician because I wasn't really writing anything for teenage girls to like. I'm sorry, if you're just making dad music, then you've forgotten what rock's about. So I was like, okay, can I make a song that my 11-year-old niece would like, you know, who loves stuff like Jonas Brothers and Taylor Swift or whatever. And so then I realized she loves Star Wars, so can I write a girl's Star Warsy song? And perfect timing because, you know, Rey, Force Awakens, Jin at the time was out in Rogue One, so it was like, okay, Star Wars is really relevant in terms of female representation right now, so that's what my niece loves, and so there's the subject matter, okay, so lyrics done, but then musically I was like, but kids like stuff that is dancing now. They don't, so how do I make it not sound dad rock? So I mixed like a Ramonesy chorus with the Doors kind of, I thought like a Doorsy bass line might work for female listeners too, because females tend to like their drum and bass. I don't want to generalize here, sound weird, but I think something in a female sensibility, which I noticed a lot, is like girls, even if you're at a club, they'll be the ones dancing before the guys get out, right? And in general, not everyone, but there's a response more to the low-end groove. And so I knew it had to be that, so I was like, okay, Doorsy bass line, low-end groove, and I think that's part of what made the Doors kind of appeal to that audience, or that sensibility. But then it's all in the beat. So what can an 11-year-old dig? So I eventually got the idea to use this simple pattern from the most popular sort of dance hip-hop group in Canada at the time, which is a group called Tribe Called Red. And in this song, and they're indigenous. So in this song called Redskin Girl, the beat was boom, boom, ah, boom, boom, ah, boom, boom. And that was booming in clubs across the country. So our manager and my producer and guitar player and mentor in real life in music, Mark, he actually knew the manager and said, do you mind if we use this beat? So we use the beat, the sample underneath the song, but we have drums playing over it. So we give it our interpretation. I think that beat made it something that a younger person could feel is relevant or respond to. And I feel like that's kind of a perfect song. I'm really critical. I think I have OCD, so there's a lot of songs that I cringe when I hear, but I think that's pretty perfect in terms of what I wanted to get and we got there. And Rebel Girl. So then when people actually liked it, you know, even David Collins gave it a great response. I have that quote on my bio, and everyone in fandom, like, even I was really honored when the Sky Talkers podcast, the two girls, they're like really young, they're like early 20s. They really liked the song, so I was like, okay, now maybe I'm not dad rock, maybe. At least for that song.
And that's all we have time for this week on the Fantha from Down Under. Stay tuned for part 2 of our chat on the next episode of the Fantha from Down Under with Din, where we go to some of the influence of where the songs on the new album for F105 have come from, and much, much more, and Star Wars chat and more. All here on Fantha Tracks, the Fantha from Down Under, and of course Fantha Tracks. All your Star Wars news in one single file.